Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for ADramOfOutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Dinah Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is podcast episode 116, Drums of Autumn Read-Along, Week 2, Chapter 2, in which we meet a ghost. Hello there. The podcast read-along is underway. One of the things I wanted to talk about before the read-along starts this episode is if you are reading Drums of Autumn and you're not going to keep the pace of 1-2 chapters a week, while you're reading ahead, if you have comments, thoughts, questions, observations, please leave a message on the call-in line at 719-425-9444 or drop me an email, contact@adramofoutlander.com. I can put those messages aside to address when I do get to the chapter that you're in. So feel free. Don't feel like you're tied simply to the week that I'm doing. We have approximately 42 episodes to get through, so I would not be reading at that sort of pace either. I have to, only because I'm the one producing the read-along. Though I've read Drums of Autumn, I don't know how many times at this point. The summary for this episode: the Merry Fraser Band bury a friend in the creepy kirkyard. They get a terrible fright. They meet the fugitive prisoner and help him reluctantly. Claire takes a river bath that's much deserved, and then Jamie joins her. They swelter in love and heat. Their future is wide open, like the wilderness. They have the funds to bury poor Gavin Hayes thanks to Fergus's quick thinking and hat passing in the tavern. So if you're actually reading the show notes, whether in iTunes, Google Play or Stitcher, or in the podcast link that I post, where there's an asterisk down below, it means that there will be a link that gives some further information and things I think are of interest. The funds they have are obviously in British currency, and I have never been able to figure out how much anything is in British money except for the pound. So if you click on the link down below the regular show notes, it explains what the currency was in the 18th century. So they need to figure out what to do with Gavin. It's late at night. The priest will not be awake, but they cannot take him into the woods with them to sleep or leave him in the town. He's not going to smell very good. He's not been embalmed and put on ice like a modern day body would be. So in the woods with them, it would attract animals. In the town, well, somebody might grave rob without him actually being in a grave. So Jamie decides that they're going to bury him themselves in the church cemetery. Even though they have the money, they're just going to do it. So Fergus is sent to go get a shovel, or a spade, as they called it. As the group of them, along with the wagon, are moving toward the church, Claire notes that the funeral procession, or the cortege, as it's called in the book, is less dignified than usual. Duncan is repeating parts of the lament that are a little unsavory. Fergus sourly mumbles about the likelihood of getting thrown in jail for disturbing the peace. I love how salty and French Fergus is in the books. He has so much texture to him. When they arrive at the churchyard, it is quiet and remote, so they're not likely going to wake anyone up. In fact, it's as dark as a crypt due to the overhanging magnolia branches. Now, the type of magnolia tree that is in this churchyard or kirkyard is the deciduous type, meaning it gets leaves and then they change color and fall off and bud again in the spring. Moving through the air is described as pushing aside curtains of black velvet. If you've never been to the southern United States, this is an apt description when the weather is warm. The air is a palpable force. I mean, you can almost grab it with your hands and hold on to it. Though nothing like the crisp Highlands air, the mist reminded Claire of the Tannisk in the story Jamie told. That spirit that scared Gavin so greatly that he would never go out at night again. Well, not until he went to follow the Bonnie Prince. So they roamed around the graveyard looking for an open space to bury the body. The men are all well lubricated by alcohol from the tavern, but this is leaving young Ian emotionally tender. He is scared from that story. He is creeped out. He doesn't like how dark it is at all. And the effects of the dark cemetery are not lost on Claire either. She feels she's a ghost herself with the remoteness and isolation of this place. Now, ghosts are a theme throughout the Outlander series, and they're everywhere. And in the beginning of this book, in the prologue, Claire talked about having ghosts around her, and she thinks one's her mother. And the title of this chapter is In Which We Meet a Ghost. So there are going to be varying types of ghosts that are going to be addressed in this chapter and forward in this book. Industrious as ever, Jamie had taken a candle from the tavern. He says it will be like an Easter vigil. He saw one once at Notre Dame in Paris. The church was all dark, but the folk coming for the service would buy small tapers from the crones at the doors. It was something like this. The church was all dark, but the folk coming for the service would buy small tapers from the crones at the doors. It was something like this. I felt, rather than saw, his motion at the sky above. A great space above, all ringing with the silence, and folk packed in on every side. Hot as it was, I gave an involuntary shiver at these words, which conjured up a vision of the dead all around us, more ghosts, crowding silently side by side in anticipation of an imminent resurrection. And then Jamie goes on to say that when the silence was too much to bear, everyone started lighting their candles. And the church came alive with 1,000 small flames, but it was the first candle that broke the dark. Then Jamie uses the words, Lumen Christi, Light of Christ, et requiescat in pace amici. This means, and rest in peace. And amici, I believe, means someone that you care for, friend. And it's interesting because in my Nook, the word is misspelled. It is spelled with a G instead of a Q. Unless, of course, it's the font and it really is a Q. I'm not sure. Young Ian and Jamie take turns digging the hole. And Claire recounts how medical students used to steal fresh bodies to practice dissection. Did they or do they? Jamie asks. One of Claire's not uncommon inadvertencies, unintentional or not focusing the mind, in her case, alluding to things out of time or setting to this reality that she's in. And she's going to do that throughout. She's going to mix up her timing, and she'll say past tense for future or current. Most of the time, people don't notice. She remembers the difference between an embalmed body in a clinical setting to what's happening right in front of them. Young Ian injects, adding a story about his father Ian almost being taken away while in prison. Doctors came in because somebody had died, and they picked him up in his sound sleep. And then when he woke up, it totally freaked them out, as well as him. And Ian always regarded doctors as ghoulies, henceforth. Claire had been a skilled surgeon in her own time. Here she's considered merely a wise woman. But I tend to think Claire could never be anything but a physician regardless of title. So it's interesting that that's put in here. And that's also in the books throughout, that she's not considered a real doctor. yet she doctors more than many of the doctors do, who are simply interested in bloodletting. Jamie is not fearing the ghoulies himself, and he leans down to kiss Claire. They both have an unexpected sexual response. It's common for a surge of lust to accompany the presence of death, is what Claire says. I was unable to find any good information regarding this. However, it does make sense, the need for release, connection with another human, or simply to feel good in this type of circumstance. Much like how lust can surge after a battle or fight. And I did include a link for that. Have you ever experienced this phenomenon? I guess this would be not too dissimilar to having a really serious knockdown drag-out fight with your partner, husband, wife, etc., and then you have make-up sex. Or if you've experienced a really seriously traumatic event, and then you find yourself really needing that connection that sex offers. So Jamie encourages Claire to sit down because her leg is not long healed from that tibia fracture that she experienced when she fell off of the Artemis. Claire is in serious lust right now. He touches her and she envisions dragging him down to the earth and having her way with him right there. And Jamie's not much better off. He's getting goose flesh wherever she touches. But the spell is broken for the moment as Rollo eyes Claire narrowly. It's time to go fetch Gavin. The hole is deep enough. Young Ian is scared in the dark from the story. Claire most assuredly tells him the Tannisk will not be coming for Gavin, and she hopes she's right. It's interesting how Claire is not superstitious at all, but having fallen through the stones and now traveling on purpose through the stones, she understands there are supernatural forces. There are things at work that she cannot explain. So who is she to say that the Tannisk does not exist? And for somebody who's so science-based, and though I believe Claire gets more religiously foundational or spiritual as time goes, that she's really into science and what's in front of her and tends to be a bit agnostic. But that shifts as the books continue, I think. I like that Jamie has a very deep spiritual connection and Claire's deepens as they go. They reach the cart. Claire is happy they will be done with this soon so they can go to the woods and sleep. Suddenly, all hell breaks loose with shrieks of horror. A figure sat up in the wagon bed. Dun, dun, dun! I guess they met a ghost. Okay, so it's not Gavin. It's none other than the fugitive. I can imagine this scene. It's been very quiet. It's somber. It's solemn. They're all freaked out by how dark it is in this kirkyard. And then they see a body sit up. And all this craziness is going on. And Fergus yells, "Arrête, espèce de cochon." And the best I can figure out what this means is it tells him to stop, you pig. I don't know why he calls him a pig. Does anybody have any idea why he would call him a pig? And then he clubs the figure with this spade shovel. It's pretty funny. It turns out, of course, like I said, that's the prisoner who escaped from the gallows earlier that day. He's not from hell. Or is he? Pretty interesting to watch what this character does right here. Claire describes him as a man around 30, muscular and powerfully built with fair hair. Turns out he'd been waiting in this wagon since mid-afternoon, right after they put Gavin in it. His name is Stephen Bonnet, and he's an Irishman. He seems no stranger to a fight because his nose is crooked, and Claire thinks he likely attracts women easily, except for her, because he eyes her in a way she doesn't like. Jamie's doing his best to size up this criminal. He wants to know why he was sentenced to hang. Smuggling and piracy, he says. Jamie's trying to decide if he's a good risk to turn in or let go his way. Bonnet invokes Gavin's name to negotiate for them to help him to safety out of town. So he's manipulative because he's using the name of Gavin Hayes as his friend, and Jamie reluctantly agrees to continue on and help him get past the checkpoint. But Gavin must be buried first, so Stephen Bonnet helps him with that. They made a simple gravestone and cairn. The lit candle is left behind to give Gavin a light to guide his ascent. They leave him with a simple blessing. Jamie says it in Gaelic, but it translates to, "Eternal rest grant unto him, O God, and let perpetual light shine upon him." That's a very nice blessing. And they turn and they go. They were helping Bonnet get past the military checkpoint. Unlike the prior checkpoints that they'd come across during their travels, this one was highly fortified due to the missing prisoner. I wonder what would happen to them if he was caught in their cart. I'm sure they could say that he forced them to do it or something. They go through the checkpoint process of questions and answers, lotta. And one of the soldiers stabs the corpse to make sure it's dead. Nice. They're allowed through in the nick of time before Bonnet starts to bleed. Because dead men don't bleed, as Bonnet says. And then, this Bonnet has the balls to ask them for some provisions before they drop him off at a set point a few miles away. So, he's hidden their cart all day, without permission. He's a wanted fugitive that was going to be hanged for smuggling and piracy. Then he asks them if they'll take him past this checkpoint so he can get out of town safely. And then he wants provisions. Why would Jamie do all these things for this man? Is it because he wanted to get rid of him? And that was the only way to do it? Because he thought he was some kind of kindred? But I didn't get that impression. So this really tells us about the sly, savvy nature and the mercenary nature of Stephen Bonnet, simply in the way that he's asking for things. They discuss Bonnet's trade in smuggling. Duncan obviously has a dislike for him, and Jamie is suspicious but agreeable to get him on his way. As they ride along, Claire leans into Jamie. Feeling the safety and security of him, she drifts into uneasy sleep. As she says, the kind that happens when you can't lay down. I adore the picture of Jamie pulling her in to him, and then her releasing the weight of the world for a moment in relaxation against him. That regardless of what's going on, she feels utterly safe, utterly protected. Now, this is the Claire and Jamie that we expect to see. This is the Claire and Jamie that were when he put her back through the stones at Culloden. And now, over the past months, they've reconnected, and now they're back to what I consider normal. This is usual behavior without question, right? They have that trust and they have that comfort. Jamie urges her to go lie down on the wagon bed because he's afraid she's going to fall into the road. So she changes places with Bonnet and lays her head upon a leather bag of salt. After more uneasy sleep, she wakes to Bonnet and Jamie talking. Jamie explains why he saved him. This is definitely Jamie's character. He says, "You will not have slept much last night, I think, knowing what was to come to you with the day." And Bonnet agrees he hadn't slept. And Jamie recounts that he once lived through such a night, knowing that he would hang in the morning, and yet he lived through the grace of one who risked much to save him. Interesting. And so Bonnet goes on and says that Jamie is considered a half-ghost. So here's another ghost we get to meet. We have Gavin's ghost. We have Bonnet scaring the hell out of them as a ghost. We have Claire feeling like a ghost. And I could find no reference for this, but Bonnet calls it as Gina Ajali. And the Cherokee use it. And these are considered people who should have died but survived. Like a woman who survives a mortal illness, a man falling into enemy hands who escapes, somebody who was meant to hang, who doesn't, who gets away. And these people, these half-ghosts, are supposed to be able to talk to the spirits and see the Nunnehi, the little people, the old ones, the fairy folk. Okay? Interesting. So Jamie connects the little people with the fairies. And Stephen Bonnet is Irish. And I have a cold today, so my accents are going to be just horrific. So I'm probably not going to do them hardly at all. But the one thing that Jamie does take some contention with is that though in the Highlands they have some of the same beliefs, that Highlanders don't eat your heart. So they're not savages like the Cherokee. Really? Now, I couldn't find any Native American Cherokee connections for this concept, except for one wiki page that needed additional citations and other information. The only information I found online was referencing this book and these chapters. So if any of you are more versed in Native American lore, please let me know. Because I find it fascinating, and it wouldn't surprise me if Native American tribes did have specific words for something like the old folk or the fairies. Claire wakes as the wagon stops. Young Ian and Jamie are going to tend to the horses. And Jamie wants her to go find some place to sleep, but she insists on bathing first. She hasn't taken her clothes off in more than a week. They're dirty, they're ratty, and they've been suctioning to her in that sweltering South Carolina heat. She heeds Jamie's cautions about the currents in the water. And as she turns to go toward the creek or the river, Stephen Bonnet is right in front of her. And he bids her adieu, and she wishes him luck. And as he's leaving, he mentions how a man makes his own luck. Again, this is a clue being left behind. He's very mercenary. Does he have honor among thieves? I tend to think he doesn't, based on all the demands he placed on them. Like, he wasn't just merely grateful they didn't turn him in. He wanted safe passage, he wants provisions, and now he's saying a man makes his own luck. And as he leaves, Claire remarks on his walking like the ghost of a crippled bear, because his leg is injured. So there's another ghost, but this time of an animal. So she's called him an animal. Claire's got some insight on him, even if she didn't voice it to Jamie exactly. And Jamie has some concerns, but what's done is done at this point. And Jamie hopes he didn't make a mistake in allowing this man freedom. The crown does not always pick the wrong man to hang, Sassenach. He worries that he helped a villain go free. Claire makes her way down to the water, and she disrobes piece by piece, and she's so grateful for it. She enters the water, paying attention to the tide. It's much cooler than the hot night air, and it's cold at first. She splashes her face. She drinks the sweet, fresh water, She splashes her body and rinses her hair several times and scrubs her body all over with the fine sand until she glows. I love this piece of writing right here. Finally, I climbed out onto a rocky shelf and lay languid as a mermaid in the moonlight. The heat of the air and the sun-warmed stone now comfort to my chilled body. I combed out my thick curly hair with my fingers, scattering drops of water. The wet stone smelled like rain, dusty and tingling. I felt very tired, but at the same time very much alive, and that the state of half-consciousness, where thought is slowed and small physical sensations magnified. I moved my bare foot slowly over the sandstone rock, enjoying the slight friction, and ran a hand lightly down the inside of my thigh. A ripple of goosebumps rising in the wake of my touch. So she's kind of going over her entire body here. It's the first time she's had freedom to be naked in over a week. And she's hyper aware. And Jamie asked her to stay awake as long as she could. And so she's trying. But now she's not only lusty, but she's paying attention to all the different sensations. So she's basically doing foreplay by herself. Her mind is going to wander here. And then she notices Rollo catching his dinner nearby. And this reminds her of a wild Rousseau painting. Her mind wanders to the primitive nature of the New World, its vast wilderness and dangers, but freedom and adventure are also out there in that wild. So it's the juxtaposition, safety, security of the 20th century for her, or coming here and having adventure and freedom and love in the wilderness and dangers that are out there. Her mind continues to wander to Brianna safe in her own time, to the bugs and how she combats them daily. And she uses pennyroyal and tobacco leaves, which I think would have been pretty effective. But I wonder how much the skin would soak in the nicotine from the tobacco. I wonder. Pennyroyal is a mosquito repellent, along with the basil, peppermint, and others that are found in the link in the bottom of the show notes. One of the things that's noted in here is that Claire doesn't get bit by the bugs, just like she doesn't generally get sick. Well, like I've said before, if Claire went to another time, insects, viruses, and bacteria would indeed affect her, just like anyone else. She would not have time traveler's immunity by nature or inoculation. She wouldn't. It is something that Diana Gabaldon came up with, but it doesn't really hold to scientific correction. And then her mind goes back to Jamie. They hadn't been intimate in some days while traveling roughly with the others near. Claire talks about her dislike of having sex when others are close. And it affirms my idea that Claire's a bit prudish unless she's actually having sex with the person she loves. No holds barred in that circle of trust for Claire. But otherwise, she's not big into public displays of affection. She doesn't say, I love you very often. She's pretty staid. And she's surprised by things and kind of gets shocked by things sometimes. Even though maybe in her own marital bed, she's a wild beast. Following her thoughts, she begins to masturbate. And she's wondering out loud where Jamie is. Well, he is, of course, right there, and he's watching her silently. I swear he is part wild animal because he can completely, with utter silence, approach in any situation, it seems like. She opens her eyes to see him 6 feet away. Startled, my eyes popped open. He was standing in the stream 6 feet away, thigh deep in the water, his genitals stiff and dark against the pallid glow of his body. His hair lay loose around his shoulders, framing a face white as bone, eyes unblinking and intent as those as the wolf dog. Utter wildness, utter stillness. Yes. You can definitely get a vibe of what's going to happen from this writing. We get the full impact of the heat, the sweltering humidity in this, I think, beautifully done sex scene. And Jamie, always the wordsmith, says, "Christ, your mouth is slick and salty as your quim." Quim is a way better word than some of the other things he could have come up with. And Jamie, after their first encounter, surmises that people would die if they had sex in this heat all the time. He definitely needs the mountains. He is not a lowlander, not at all. They take a dunk in the water before returning to the rock to dry off. And as Claire's mind is wandering again, he reads what she's thinking of that vastness beyond them. She talks about how it is in her time. And Jamie's impressed that there'll be Scots in America, including the inventor of asphalt, a Scot named Macadam. I didn't know that Macadam is what asphalt was called because of the inventor, even though it had an A between the M and the C. So there is a link below the show notes on the Macadam company, and it briefly explains who invented it. Claire also shares there will be people all the way to California. They discuss the plight of the Native Americans getting kicked off their land and killed. And to Jamie, it seems not a problem to kick them off and to kill them since they are savages. And Claire's having a difficult time getting through to Jamie, and even brings the point home to the Scots being kicked off of their lands, and they were killed. Deeply happy and content, Claire wonders how long this bliss can last. What will the life be like? Will they be able to stand each other when the day in and day out takes root? Hearing her thoughts again, Jamie asks, "Will you grow tired of me, do you think, once we're settled?" No, he won't tire of her in the flesh because he never did when she was a ghost. He wanted her more on the last day they were together before sending her back. And she agreed. And then he wants to know what she was doing when he came upon her. And she says he knows exactly what she was doing, but he's surprised to see her masturbating. He had no idea women did such a thing. And he's a bit concerned that a woman wouldn't need a man then. This is really a sweet exchange between them, and it goes back to their ease of communication and their comfort, and they can say anything to each other. There's no embarrassment between them. And that's really how our most intimate relationship should be. I mean, if you can't talk to your partner about all the things that are personal to you, then you're missing out, or they're missing out. I mean, if they're not trustworthy to talk about masturbation or sexual needs or desires, then something is off kilter in the relationship. And Claire assures him it's better with a man, and this pleases him. And I love the next bit. He says that making love like this is like being slippery eels. And one of the things that I really liked that he said before they discussed her masturbating, he says, "Then dinna trouble yourself about it, Sassenach, and neither will I." He stroked my hair, smoothing damp curls off my forehead. "I could know you all my life, I think, and always love you. And often as I've lay with you, you still surprise me mightily sometimes like you did tonight." So that's what he had to say when he came upon her. And I think Jamie's a man who aims to please his woman. I mean, they had had sex. It didn't sound like she'd had an orgasm because he was just needed to get it done. And then he came back round and went below the navel to give her pleasure. I mean, he's a good lover. And I think that poor Leary really missed out on some good loving from him. If she could have handled him in that intensity and that openness, and she hadn't been damaged It's really sad to me to think about in the context of these characters, and when I look at them through humanity's eyes, that's really sad. I would be worried for a friend of mine who came to me and was telling me about their sex life and that he does all these things and she's just scared of him and she doesn't like it or whatever. I would be, okay, let's work on this. You need to get healthy. There's so much good that can happen in our beds with our partners or spouse. I mean, there's so much connection and things that can really bond the relationship. And it's not just the sex part, it's everything else that goes with it. And it's that frankness of intimacy, and it's that openness and that vulnerability. And that as long as it's trusted and safe there, other areas can be trusted and safe as well. So I really like how this is done in these books to really show a well-knit relationship in a marriage that, though complicated and not easy, why it's fruitful and what are the building blocks and the foundation to their solid trust and their marriage. So their pillow talk, or rock talk as I put it, is always interesting and entertaining, but it also gives us additional insight into the two of them as a couple. I know the podcast is a bit short this week. Some weeks are going to be a little longer. I was taking my cue from Voyager, where depending on the amount of pages, I could really count on about the size of the podcast. So if I end up changing the schedule a little bit and adding more chapters per week, I will let you know. I think the first two were a little bit lighter, simply because they're giving us information and basic foundation to move forward from. And I'm so glad to see a solid Jamie and Claire. And I really enjoyed Duncan Innes being so verbal in his grief and his sorrow over Hayes. So next week will be chapters 3 and 4. And again, regardless of where you are in the book while you're listening, you can leave a voicemail at 719-425-9444 with your thoughts, comments, insights, or you can send an email to contact@adramavoutlander.com. If you want to have your comments, questions, etc. put into the podcast, I would need them by Friday every week, because I usually record on Saturday. Remember to join in on the Twitter chat every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. We use the hashtag ADOO, and it's usually a great time. And we discuss whatever material the podcast covered the week before. That's what we talk about on Wednesday night. You can find A Dram of Outlander on Facebook, A Dram of Outlander page, and please ask to join the A Dram of Outlander group. It is a closed group. You have to answer some questions, but the group is really driven by members of the group. You can post messages, links, you can talk to each other and interact, whereas on the page, I'm the one in control of all the content. And there's a very few rules that you need to abide by in the group. It's in the pinned post for you to read, and I really hate having to moderate people. So thankfully, you all are amazing, and I rarely have to moderate, rarely have to delete posts or step in. So I appreciate you greatly. You are amazing. On Instagram and Twitter, it's Dram of Outlander without the A in the front. Also on Google+, and Tumblr under A Dram of Outlander. And how do you support the show? Well, that can be done in a variety of ways, primarily by sharing the podcast episodes. Tell people about it. Get them to listen along with you. share the blog post that goes along with the podcast. It's all the show notes and links and content that I've written. Go to the social media, follow, like, participate. Come to the A Dram of Outlander community. It's amazing and wonderful and supportive and smart. Really wonderful people are part of this particular community. And if you want to financially support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/A Dram of Outlander for a monthly offering as low as $1. Every penny counts. Being a solo podcaster who does everything from the website maintenance to the writing to the research to the production, it's all on me. And if you'd like to give a one-time offering, just leave me a message by email or phone and I will let you know how to do that. So I appreciate you and I thank you so much. And we're going to spend 3/4 of a year together doing this. And I look forward to hearing from you every week. And thank you for listening. And until next time, slán je va.